Good day, everybody. Good afternoon, good morning, depending on where you are, but I think most of you in the afternoon in Asia. My name is Manisha Thomas, and I'm with PHAP, and will be moderating the session today. I would really like to encourage all of you to introduce yourselves in the chat because we have participants registered from over 17 countries, so it would be great to know who's in the room with us. Before I hand over to Damien to introduce today's agenda, I'm just going to go over a few brief technical notes for you. We have interpretation available in English and French. You just need to select your preferred language using the interpretation button at the bottom of your screens.
L'interprétation est disponible en français. Veuillez sélectionner votre langue préférée à l'aide du bouton Interprétation en bas de votre écran.
The interpretation is available in French. You got to choose that in the bottom of the screen.
If you do have any problems with the Zoom platform, we have backup live streams at the two URLs shown on your screen. They require less bandwidth, but you should only use them as a backup as they don't have the same interactive features as the Zoom app does. We also have closed captioning today. Thank you, Heather, for providing those. All you need to do to see the captions is click on the bottom for live transcript and then show subtitles. So that way you can see what is happening in your transcripts as well. We will be recording today's session. It will be made available afterwards to code member companies and local code representatives, but it will not be made available to the general public. There may, however, be some excerpts, that may be pulled out, but those will to be made public, but they will only be done after the explicit consent of those who are featured in the video. So we do want you to be very open and frank today, because even if it is being recorded. So just to encourage you to keep speaking frankly and openly. Damien, I'm going to hand over to you, please, to introduce the agenda for us.
Many thanks, and thank you for everyone who's joining us today, our local code representatives, our member companies, and other stakeholders who are working together on child protection. For those who don't know me, my name is Damien Brosnan. I'm the Program Manager of the Code, hosted by ECPAT International here in Bangkok. And I wanted to just explain a little bit about how the session will work today. We have 3 parts. We will have some introductory remarks from a few different renowned speakers. We'll then have a panel discussion hosted by our Deputy Executive Director, Thomas Muller. And then we'll have a chance at the final part of the session to have feedback and interaction amongst code members and local code representatives about challenges, opportunities, success stories, and suggestions for the future. So I won't take too much of your time right now. I'll be back now and again during the sessions. But thanks again for taking the time to participate in this and for being part of a proactive approach to child protection in the world, especially in travel and tourism. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Damien. And as Damien said, we do want to make this interactive, so please do use the chat function throughout if you've got any comments or questions. And as I had mentioned earlier, please do feel free to introduce yourselves in the chat. As Damien said, we're going to start with a few introductory remarks from a number of individuals. Our first speaker is Guillaume Landry, who is the Executive Director of ECPAT International. Guillaume, please.
Dear Code representative, ladies and gentlemen, my name is Guillaume Landry. I'm the recently newly appointed Executive Director of ECPAT International. It's an honor to be with you today to gather all the private sector and representative of the code. I feel really proud to engage with you, to have role models in the business and private sectors that care about how their enterprise are influencing the life of children in all the aspects of their business model. So it's needless to say, it's been a couple of difficult years for the travel and tourism industry. And the pandemic is longing, and we'll see where it goes. But certainly the conversation about the Building Back Better movement is an opportunity to wonder, are we prepared to go back to how it was before, or is it also an opportunity to then renew the sector and making sure that community development, that child protection are embedded in the way we envisage tourism and travel across the world. And so for that reason, it's really exciting that you continue to show the way. And how are we going to expand the table to make sure that maybe other neglected sectors of this circle of interest around travel and tourism are also engaged or begin to commit to child protection? If we're thinking about the informal economy, the volunteerism, if we're looking at the travel industry and the transport industry, we're thinking about technologies and how different types of platforms are more and more involved in the experience of travel and tourism. So how are we going to make sure that law enforcement agencies are also part of the discussion straight at the beginning, and not just seen as implementer of the decision and strategies that we have to address child protection? These are all interesting challenges, and I'm eager to get your views on how we together continue to show the way and bring leadership to child protection in travel and tourism. So thank you, and I hope you're going to have a good continuation of discussion around this matter.
Thank you very much, Guillaume. Our second introductory remarks are going to be coming from Randy Durband, who is the CEO of Global Sustainable Tourism Council. Randy, please.
Hello, I'm Randy Durband, the CEO of GSTC, the Global Sustainable Tourism Council. We've been very proud to be part of a member of ECPAT and the code for many years. As you may know, the GSTC are the keepers of the GSTC criteria, global standards for sustainable tourism. And those standards include not just environmental issues on sustainability, but social issues and cultural issues and management issues. And within the social context, the input from the code and ECPAT have been valuable in the development and revision of both sets of our criteria. Both sets of the GSTC criteria, the industry criteria, the destination criteria, are widely used throughout the world by many governments and public policy and destinations and practice. Countless hotels, tour operators, and other tourism businesses apply the GSTC criteria. So the fact that the key principles of ECPAT's work are represented and included in our standard means that they have a tremendous reach. And so we're very happy to draw from their technical expertise as we, again, manage the criteria. We also talk about them in our training classes, which are global and offered in many languages to many practitioners in the travel and tourism sector. So we're very proud to have this relationship. We're very impressed with the work that ECPAT and the code do. And we have every intention to continue doing everything I just talked about in terms of disseminating our standards and our training, all of which include the essential elements of what ECPAT and the code are doing. So we thank them for their contributions and commitment to excellence, and we're happy to continue partnering with them and wish all of you success in adhering to the code and disseminating the word about it. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Randy. Next, we're going to be turning to Dr. Harold Goodwin, who's the Managing Director of the Responsible Tourism Partnership. Harold, please.
Hello, and thank you for inviting me to say something about how, from the perspective of responsible tourism, we see the issues of child protection in travel and tourism. I'm Harold Goodwin. I am the founder of the Responsible Tourism Partnership, and we work to encourage a responsible approach to tourism around the world. We've worked in a great many different destinations, and we've worked with UK outbound tour operators. One of the challenges, I think, about child protection is that the issue is largely hidden. I've only twice seen public campaigns by destinations. In Costa Rica was a destination example, and Holland, Amsterdam, particularly Amsterdam Airport, but most Holland airports carried a campaign 2 or 3 years ago, asking people to phone in if they saw examples of the abuse of children in tourism. But these are rare. One of the things I think is important to recognize about travel and tourism is that people are extremely nervous about their brand reputation. Repeat bookings are the easiest bookings to get in travel and tourism, whether you're running a hotel or a tour operator. Nobody wants to get a bad reputation. There may be a few bad eggs in the tourism industry, but the vast majority of people really value repeat clients. And we know that repeat clients will take a view about the ethical, sustainable responsibility exercised by the companies, and also that they don't recommend to others organizations, whether those are companies or hotels or tour operators, that they feel may be damaged in some way in terms of their practices. So in travel and tourism, we've seen a really successful series of campaigns on elephant back riding and swimming with dolphins. Those campaigns happen very quickly. It's now very difficult from the UK as a source market to purchase those kinds of experiences. One tour operator after another walked away from it, and so did the online travel agencies, the OTAs. Orphanage tourism is more difficult because people are told often by their faith leaders that supporting orphanages is a good thing to do. You're therefore asking the tour operators to give advice which is contrary to the faith leaders. I've said this before, I think you should be concentrating a great deal on faith leader communities and convincing them that supporting orphanages is a fairly dodgy business at best. We were successful in the UK because we could quietly convene a meeting where we invited those tour operators still offering either volunteering in orphanages or probably just as bad visits to orphanages or schools. And we just quietly talked through the risks of child trafficking, and those tours and those opportunities to volunteer in orphanages have largely disappeared from the UK marketplace. I think there's a lot to be said for just drawing the facts to the attention of those businesses whose behaviour you want to change. What I would say is that you really need to adopt different strategies for different destinations and different source markets. I think your efforts to create one common approach are frankly misguided. I think you need to look at each destination and each source market separately and work out a strategy for what works there. In a sense, what you're trying to do is to work out where you can make the change, where, as I put it crudely, where you can find the crack to put the crowbar in to achieve change. I think there's still a lot to do on this issue, and I wish you well. And if there's anything the Responsible Tourism Partnership can do to assist you, please do get in touch.
Thank you very much, Harold. And I think those were some really important points that maybe we can come back on towards the end around the campaigns that you did in terms of that quiet advocacy behind the scenes and how we can maybe learn from that. Next, I'm going to turn to Lucio Valerio Sarandrea. I apologize if I pronounced your name wrong, Lucia, who is a child protection specialist on justice and human rights with UNICEF's Regional Office for East Asia and the Pacific. Lucio, please.
Thank you very much, Damian, and thank you very much to all the participants of this very interesting conference. It's a pity that I cannot attend directly, but it is my pleasure to send this message. First of all, let me introduce myself. My name is Lucio Valerio Sarandrea, and I am the Child Protection Specialist at the UNICEF Regional Office for East Asia and the Pacific region. UNICEF's work on child protection is, as we like to say, a holistic work that takes place and considers all aspects of the life of children, and is fundamentally based on the Conventions on the Rights of the Child and its protocols when they have been ratified. the Conventions of the Rights of the Child, we always say it with great pride, is the convention that has been ratified by the highest number of states ever and has more signatories than members of the United Nations. This is very important factor to consider how relevant it is and how applicable it is. Actually, as a matter of fact, it has been ratified in all the countries that are member of the regional office. So what we are trying to fundamentally do is to support all the rights of the children. I understand that this sentence might be vague, might be too confusing, but I can give a referential point, in order to give an interpretative point on what we really mean. At UNICEF, we believe that children are not the future of the world, not the future of any country. I can imagine that this sentence might be a little bit surprising to you, but what we really mean with this kind of sentence and provocation is that children are not only the future of the world, of the country, but also the present. So the Conventions of the Rights of the Child really states that children should be considered subjects, active recipient of rights, and not objects in the hands of their parents or their caretakers. So children do have rights, children do have voices, and then what we are trying to do is that to have the rights implemented and accessible, starting, I would say, from the right to health, from the right to nutrition, education, and also being protected from violence against children. This is a very important right. What UNICEF is also trying to do is trying to update and constantly follow up in the newest trends, the newest emerging trends and issues that are coming up in regards of the threats of the children. And in this aspect are very important the general comments that the Conventions of the Committee of the Rights of the Child issues on a regular basis. And these are comments that are going in depth about the previous article of the Conventions of the Rights of the Child. I understand that in this conference there will be discussed about the role of the public sector also in preventing possible trafficking of human beings. Well, one interesting and important issue that we are doing is that we are providing support and information to the states when they are reporting to the Conventions of the Rights of the Child about these general comments. And there is general comment number 16 that specifically talks about the rights of the private sector in defending child rights. So also the private sector has a role that needs to be very clear, needs to be very active in defending the rights of the children, not only, and also other human rights, not only is the state is the duty bearer. But I would also like to highlight in the few seconds left the work that we are doing in promoting justice for the children. There is a recent general comment number 24. There is also the rights of the children in the digital environment that is increasingly important and increasable opportunity and threat for children. And at the same time, we are supporting also the implementation and empowerment of children in regards of climate justice and climate change, because as we like to say, there is no planet B. So I wish a very fruitful discussion and wish you good luck. And remember, children are not only the future, but also the present of this world. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Lucio. We're next going to turn to Marina Elsner, who is the Director of Sustainable Development, Diversity, and Inclusion for North and Central America with Accor Hotels. Marina, please.
Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Sorry I can't be there with you live, but thank you so much for the opportunity to share a little bit about what Accor has been doing. So Accor has actually been committed to protecting children from sexual exploitation since 2001. And in 2014, we introduced WATCH, which stands for We Act Together for Children. And this is the group's training program to eradicate the sexual exploitation of children. And today, all of our frontline employees are trained on sex trafficking and sexual exploitation through this program. And more specifically, in North and Central America, we have actually been working very closely with ECPAT USA, UK, as well as a local organization here in Canada called Courage for Freedom, where we've worked to continuously enhance and evolve our training. And last year, we evolved our training to make sure that it also incorporated labor trafficking, as this is also an issue in the countries that we operate in North and Central America. And we know that the hospitality industry plays a key role to end human trafficking, and we recognize the importance of our leadership in this space. This is an issue that crosses borders and brands, and we really believe that by working together with industry and subject matter experts that we can strengthen our efforts. And I'm proud to share that in January 2020, we led an industry education session here in Toronto, bringing together nearly 200 individuals from 60 different organizations across the Greater Toronto area to tackle this issue. And I think it's really imperative that we continue to do our part and to take action on this issue. And I'm really hopeful that together we'll continue to make great strides in the fight against human trafficking.
Thank you very much, Marina. And great that Accor has been in this fight against exploitation and trafficking for so long, and that continued commitment. I'm now going to hand back to you, Damien, for an update on the top members of the code. Damien, please.
So at the time of recording, the code has nearly 400 member companies from all around the world. Of those, we have recognized at the moment 42 top members who have demonstrated very strong implementation of the 6 criteria of the code. And we work with their annual reports and also the feedback from the local code representatives to evaluate the top member status, which gives a high recognition, I suppose, for companies, but also allows them to be really leaders and figureheads in the tourism industry on child protection in travel and tourism. So we're excited that we'll be announcing some new top members in the coming weeks. We're still finalizing the shortlist of those, but we would like to really recognize the top members. You can find the list of these 42 top members on our website quite easily. And we can share a link afterwards if needed. But it's a really good thing to aspire to, I think, for all member companies of the code, just to show that you've not just become a member of the code, but you've taken all of the measures that we outline in our 6 criteria, and you've really committed and followed through on that commitment to child protection. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Damien. And now that we've had our introductory remarks, we're going to turn to the panel, as Damien has said. And our discussion today is going to be moderated by Thomas Muller, who's the Deputy Executive Director of ECPAT International. But before I hand over to you, Thomas, I'm going to introduce our panelists and then give you the floor. So on our panel today, we have Joyatri Ray with Equations India. Joyatri is currently the Director of Equitable Tourism Options, or Equations, a research, campaign, and advocacy organization working on tourism and development issues in India. Equations works with other organizations, government, tourism stakeholders, and communities to encourage people-centered forms of tourism and policies that ensure significant local benefits and take into account the negative impacts of tourism. Welcome, Joyatri. Next, we also have Jackie Appel, who is the Director of Step In, Step Up in Myanmar. Jackie is the founder of Step In, Step Up, or SISU, a nonprofit based in Yangon, Myanmar. The core focus of SISU is vocational training and humanitarian support. Over 500 young adults have been through Step In, Step Up since 2018, including during the 18 months of disruption from the COVID crisis and the 2021 coup. 80% of those who have gone through the program have found entry-level roles in a variety of fields, including hospitality, housekeeping, restaurants, general office work, call centers, and healthcare aides. Welcome, Jackie. We also have Winston Haynes, who is Vice President of Operations with Archipelago International Hotels. Winston's an American who's been living in Indonesia for the last 24 years. He's a French and Italian trained chef with Four Seasons, and he joined Archipelago in 1998 and has risen to the position of Vice President of Operations with Archipelago International. He's handling the operations in over 140 hotels, resorts, and villas in Indonesia, and assisting with operations in their other properties around the world. Archipelago is the largest privately owned hospitality management company in Indonesia. Winston, because you joined a little bit late, could I just ask you to say a couple words so we can test your audio, please, to make sure that we can hear you okay?
Sure. I've got my audio on now. Is that okay?
Perfect. Thank you. Before I hand over to you, Thomas, as we said at the beginning, we do want this to be really interactive. So while the panel is ongoing, I do invite you to put any comments or questions that you may have for the panelists into the chat box. And you can also raise your hand, and then we'll give you the floor after the panelists speak. So Thomas, I'm going to hand over to you, please.
Well, thank you, Manisha, and good afternoon, everyone. Warm welcome again. Jackie Apple, Winston Haynes, and Joyatri Ray. We really appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedules to share your experience and expertise and to highlight some of your good practices from your work, especially in the context of the code and of our collective effort of ending child sexual exploitation. Now, at the same time, we don't keep you for long. We just have 20 minutes for this entire panel. The plan is, as Manisha just mentioned, I'm going to ask you a few questions. Every one of you gets around 5 minutes to respond, and then our team will monitor the chat, see if there are any questions coming up, and time permitted, we will run those also with the panelists. Hopefully, this provides for a quick insight into the code and why it's such an important effort. One of the code's key strengths, I believe, is really its diversity and ability to bring together different stakeholders from different sectors. And today's panel really is testament to this diversity, with one training school, one hotel company, and an NGO present. So that's really wonderful and shows that diversity. Now, that being said, let's jump right into our discussion. And Jackie, I want to start with you. We heard it, you're the founder and CEO of Step In, Step Up, which really has a remarkable and very inspiring story. As I believe I read on your website, it all started as an initiative run out of your own house. Yes. Step In, Step Up focuses on preparing local youth in villages across Myanmar for entry-level jobs by training them in some very basic vocational skills. And while doing so, you create awareness of global issues such as care for the environment, trafficking, exploitation, and other child protection issues. By now, Step In, Step Up has a training campus that has more than a space for 250 trainees, and your work has led, as Manisha said, to a remarkable impact across communities in Myanmar. And of course, you joined the code, which is wonderful. So, Jackie, how have your students found the experience of learning about child protection? Is it a confronting subject for them? And how do they manage to integrate these learnings and translate them into actions in their daily lives?
You know, in the beginning, for some of the trainees, they felt very uncomfortable until one or two people started to talk, and they said they had witnessed something that had happened in the local villages, or they had heard about something. So this opened up a group discussion, which was becoming quite animated. So when we chose to do the questions that were in the quiz, we chose to do it an on-the-job role play, as if they're going to go into that job where they're learning all the time. And we let them choose an answer A, B, C, or D, and they chose what they were passionate about. And some of the answers could have been one or the other. They weren't sure, but they had these groups, and there were 4 groups, and they created very strong arguments and discussions. So what was awkward for them to talk about in the beginning became very easy. And they all made the decision there and then they were going to be ambassadors and go into the villages and share this information, because we also have orphans that we take care of, and we also know about orphan tourism. So we were able to teach them all of these things. It's been good.
So, and do you see how do they integrate that into their daily lives? I understand. I mean, there's a lot of information that you provide, and then we all are part of trainings and get a lot of information, and then we get back into our normal lives, and then to our daily lives. How do they integrate that into their daily lives?
They're so aware of it. We've had some previously trafficked people come through the program who have then opened up and started to talk to this group of people. And some have asked to become anti-trafficking ambassadors, where they go into the village and openly speak about it, it's a big change from what it was a couple of years ago when there was no knowledge. So they're happy to even talk about it as if it's just another day and another subject. It's not forbidden as it used to be forbidden.
It's brilliant, and to see also that so many of them then also move on and actually get into the job market and actually build a life for themselves as an outcome, and have that awareness carrying it forward of those global issues. It's fantastic. Can you, if you were to give advice to other organizations or companies in that regard, and say, why would you engage on those topics? If you give us the elevator pitch for the code to other organizations, because obviously we need, it's great to see, and we heard from Damien the membership and how many organizations and companies are engaging, but we need more. This is a global issue. Everyone needs to play a role. So how do you sell the code to others?
We have hotel groups nearby, and we go in there all the time, and we explain to them, since we work with NGOs and they've counseled previously trafficked people, and they know it's tragic. It's very tragic here, especially here at the moment. So the subject has always been a forbidden thing, and we are urging the companies to openly speak about this to everybody now, and to make it a normal subject, and not something that should be seen if you are supporting the code that people then cannot come. It's a good practice to have. So we're trying to encourage everybody to allow this to become a normal household discussion and not something hidden.
Brilliant. And then the last question I might have for you. So we heard about the challenges that we lived through in the last 2 years. And then obviously Myanmar has its own story that is going through. And then, so how do you manage to keep on operating there and keep on making these issues priority?
It has been, child protection and human trafficking has been such a core part of our training, along with English and soft skills and everything else that they do. And when we've had the COVID crisis, and now obviously the other crisis, we've started online platforms, but so you can teach as much as you can teach online, and we have booklets, and we try and keep it going and keep it alive. But the actual practicing has to be done in classroom. So we do have to be together. So it is difficult, but we do keep an open policy where they can contact us, and we can teach as much as possible online. Yes.
Yeah, it has been inspiring to see actually how organizations responded to these challenges. But I think what you mentioned also is true, that we really need to keep that one-on-one personal contact alive and really build those relationships and those contacts.
Yeah.
So thank you, Jackie. We might come back to you later, time permitted. It's wonderful to see your story and how impactful your work is in communities across Myanmar. Thank you. Now over to Winston Haynes. Winston, you are Vice President at Archipelago International Hotels, which is the largest privately owned and independent hotel operator in Southeast Asia. Archipelago own over 200 properties already and has ambitious growth plans with a particular focus I've seen on the Middle East and the Caribbean. Archipelago is also a code member. So my first question to you, Winston, would be really share with us what inspires a company like Archipelago to seek membership with the code.
Sure. Thomas, thank you very much for having me. I apologize for my unstable internet. In Bali, it's sometimes up and down. But however, has always been aware of human trafficking. Pandemic struck, we found that some of the child trafficking and abuse had moved from freestanding buildings, which were closed due to the pandemic, into the hotels. And we noticed there was an uptick in people using the hotels for business, child trafficking. And John Flood, the president and CEO, got in touch with Damien and the code, and we got together and we discussed how we could use everything that the code has prepared, as far as training. How could we use that in our company to make sure that our staff is aware and that this is not happening in our hotels? And how can we share this with other hotel companies or people that we come in contact with? So we made a real effort starting about 2 years ago to make sure that everybody in our company was trained and certified. We have them go online, they use the code materials, they get certified. We have posters in the back of the house. Our corporate human resources team goes to each hotel during the opening and once a year during the audit. And we have material, a PowerPoint presentation, and then I believe there's a couple of slides that we'll share later. To make sure that, from the housekeeping staff to the engineering staff to the front office staff, they're aware of what child trafficking is. They're aware of what signs there might be of people, whether it's in the room or in the restaurant or when they're in the lobby. And they are taught not to be shy, because in Asia, a lot of people are shy when it comes to something like this. So we give them a voice and we try to empower them to say something, to speak up and say, hey, there might be a problem in this room, or hey, there might be a problem with this couple. And so far, really works. We have been made aware. I hope that came through okay.
Is it my internet, or is it?
It's probably not. It's probably my internet.
We're breaking up at my end.
We're going to stop the video here to see if that works better.
Yeah, please go ahead. Okay, can you hear me better now?
I can hear you now. Yes, perfect.
Okay. If you missed all the other part that I've been talking for quite a while, I feel bad. Anyway, Archipelago just takes it really seriously. A couple of years ago, we really decided that this was something that we had to keep an eye on. We knew about child trafficking, however, we didn't have the code, as a support for us and to help us with the training and to understand how to bring other people who are involved with the hotel on board, like our suppliers. We have been able to train all of our staff. We have 15,000 staff across the archipelago. We train them and get them certified. We have posters. Okay, you heard the rest. Okay, sorry guys, I don't know where I got kicked out. Somebody's mentioning that they'll understand. Anyway, again, I apologize for the technical difficulties, but Archipelago, we do take this seriously.
And that's brilliant. Thank you, Winston. And yeah, so you spoke a little bit about how you approach this topic with staff and an intense effort of training staff, 15,000 staff, I think I picked up. So how do you bring a topic like that to the customers? That's maybe even more challenging with people who approach you as a company, want to have a good time, holidays and so on. Then this topic is addressed. How do you go about that?
Well, we actually don't promote it to our guests. This is something that we train the staff to be aware of, and we hope that the guests that are coming and staying in our hotels are not involved in trafficking, and we don't want to necessarily put up X banners or posters around saying, hey, we're against child trafficking, which would actually highlight it to some people who maybe might, think that way at some point. So we just focus on our staff. We focus on our suppliers to make sure that they also everything that they're supplying us with has not been using any kind of slave labor or child labor. So it's not only what's going on in the hotel, but the people who work with us. We want to make sure that they understand that we're supporting. Geez, this is really bad.
Holding my speech on mute. Winston, I was just following up.
Thomas. Can you hear me?
I can hear you, yes.
Hang on, let me put on.
I was just following up with one more question for you.
Sure.
Winston, so it is great to hear your efforts in training staff and really seeing your commitment that this topic is taken seriously. How do you, if once that decision is made and you have meetings internally, how do you come across the code? How did you find the code?
My boss, John Flood, the president and CEO, got in touch with Damien, and then they brought me on board to implement it. So exactly how John and Damien, I'm not sure. However, John shared it with me and asked me if he thought that.
Well, thank you, Winston. We really have still a lot of connectivity.
Team the staff understand how to speak up. Yeah.
Right. Apologies, Winston, if you hear me. We struggle hearing you. The connection is really wobbly, but I understand it was a connection between Damien and your CEO, which is great to hear also. But thank you, Winston. This is really, like I said, it's great to see Archipelago's leadership in taking child protection seriously in the industry. Thank you so much.
Thomas, maybe I can speak very briefly to the start. I believe that John Flood, the CEO, found the code via our website, maybe Googling child protection. I'm not sure the exact avenue, but it was one of these inquiries that we get from lots of companies around the world to say, we want to do something. How do we help protect children in our work? And that started the process. And so from then on, a couple of years ago, we progressed, and I think it's been a very successful partnership, and I think Archipelago is doing a fantastic job. Thanks.
Terrific, and it really means that if organizations or companies are proactive and looking for support in this, then they can find the code, and they do reach out. It's wonderful. Thank you, Winston. I move on to Joyatri Ray. Great to see you here, Joyatri, both as representing Equations as an ECPAT member, but also based in Bangalore, but also as a local code representative in India. And one of your roles in this respect is, of course, engaging with the travel and tourism industry and exploring with them, introducing the code to them, raising awareness about child protection and its relevance for their business. So we've spoken a few times about it also, that the mid and large size companies and hotels or tour operators or other stakeholders of the industry, the mid or large size representatives are quite happy to engage with the code. We struggle a little bit when it's about engaging with the more informal part of the industry and the local hotels, not connected to a big branch, or even home sharing businesses. Can you share us a little bit about your experiences in engaging with companies on these difficult topics, but especially maybe with a focus on those more informal structures?
Thank you, Thomas. Can you hear me? My connection is a little So let me start by saying that, as you rightly pointed out, that when it is a big hotel chain or it's a multinational, it's a bit easier to implement code because we are looking at compliance to the land of the law as well. So that could be one instrument to say, if you're wanting to be compliant to the land of the law, you can use this instrument which is readily available for you to be child-centered, child-friendly company. Now the problem comes when you have this and in India or in South Asia, you see that the entire tourism industry, almost 80% are actually characterized by informal sector. So you will see street vendors, they're organized, but they're informal, which basically means that they do not have there's no legal binding to be compliant as such, other than they being the citizen of India. Other than that, they don't have a corporate responsibility as such, corporate compliance as such. So the idea when we started working on this, as Equation works on sustainable tourism paradigm, and we try to talk about, try to engage with different stakeholders. The initial point was to understand what are their difficulties and their problems and their challenges. The informal sector challenges in their own ways of operations. And in doing that, we figured out that one of the biggest challenges, they don't come under any major law per se, because they're not recognized as formal sector. They're operating alone as a collective, or they're operating as a supply chain of a multinational. So I really want to make this two distinction, because when it comes to the supply chain, then it's again easier if they belong to a multinational. Then by the virtue of signing the code, the multinational has to work with their own supply chain. So they are going to be compliant. Now this other group who is not really tied by any law as such, how do you work with them? So what we did is, we worked with them we found out this particular challenge, and we tried to look at what are the various existing spaces which we can actually contribute to in their own ways of operations. And that is where the breakthrough started happening.
Yeah, so it's really almost the energy is upside down, right? The big multinationals and the larger businesses, they might explore how to make their own business more responsible, sustainable. Then they find the code and reach out, whereas for the informal sectors, really to engage with them is to actually engage with them and reach out to them. And if they're part of a big global supply chain, maybe they're taken care of an international business, but still not all of them are connected. And then it would, in a country like India with so much, such a big population, so many businesses more in the informal sector, it must be a huge challenge, right? So how do you cope with the vast kind of scope of things?
Yeah, very interesting question, Thomas. We started by orientation. So we started orienting about why is it important for the informal sector to really address child protection as part of their business, and not as a social cause alone. What is the importance for them to work or to address child protection if they want to be a good business citizen, or a kind of responsible business house kind of a thing. So one thing we started doing is, any destination that we go, we try and work on a facilitator multi-stakeholder platform. And what does it mean? In the multi-stakeholder platform, we bring in informal and formal sector along with community and then the tourism planners together. So we have street vendors, representatives. We have guides representatives coming in. We have local transporters coming in. We have big hotel chains coming in, and also the local administration and community representatives coming in. Because the idea is that to have an ownership about their, having ownership of that particular destination, which is also their place of living. Most of the small and medium operators are not coming from outside of outside of the place. They are more or less part of this. So they play dual, triple role. They are community member, they are parents, they have born and brought up there, and today they are actually tourism enterprises. So they have a longer relationship with the destination to be sustained. So you work with that idea that how that you have several roles when you're playing. So you cannot alienate your role as a tourism entrepreneur as one role. So we start by orienting them. And in that orientation process, what we figured out that these various stakeholders come together to find out a way of operation. Like many of these guide associations, which has come up with clauses within their own charter of operations to say how will they, two things. What will they do if their members are found guilty? And what will they do if they are asked for it? If somebody in that tourist, when the tourist coming in, somebody is asking for something. So two very distinct ways of dealing with it. Other thing that helped them to look at it is saying that what they're doing is not a charity. What they're doing is finally they are ensuring they're adhering to the law of the land is one thing. They're merely following what the law says. And the second thing, they are really establishing a brand of themselves, which is saying that we're a no nonsense business. We have no tolerance for such things. For us to be in tourism, for us to be part of tourism as to flourish, we do not need child sexual exploitation as one of the product or one of the services. That's a no. So I think the very important conversation that happened is that not only about responsible tourism, but looking at responsibility in tourism. If I am an operator, if I am a part of the tourism, even in the very active role that they have taken on awareness building among the tourists, among their own clients themselves, and to say what is the do's and don'ts, what would they encourage and what would they really not encourage. So I think the step by step going along with them, understanding their reality, and to slowly push this idea together that it is not something that you're doing as a charity, but as a business imperative. It was another breakthrough that we got.
Yeah. Thank you, Joyatri. Manisha, a quick check-in with time. How we're doing? I have a few more questions here, but I need your guidance on how we are doing time-wise.
You're totally fine, Thomas. Please keep going. Please keep going.
Brilliant. So then I have one more for Winston. Hopefully the connection is working in our favor, Winston. We heard it from Joyatri. One part of the responsibility is really engaging with their own staff and those people that really report to you or are on your payroll. And then there's this extended responsibility towards the supply chain, which is to a certain extent a little bit beyond your control. But how does it work with Archipelago to bring this topic to the supply chain?
Okay. Wow, nice picture. The Archipelago, we put it in the contracts with all of our suppliers. So the code has a standard template that we felt, basically stated exactly what we wanted to say. And, if you're going to be dealing with Archipelago, you have to make sure that through your supply chain, there is no child trafficking, there's no slavery, there's no child labor. And so far, none of our suppliers have disagreed with signing off on this. So we put that into all of our standard contracts, whether it's a chemical supplier, whether it's a food supplier, whether it's furniture supplier. Everyone we're dealing with, we want to make sure that they're aware of the issue, and they don't take part in it, and they do what they can to stop it. That's how we see it.
Is there any way that you monitor that engagement across the supply chain? Is there a possibility to do so anyway? So more like a question in regards to overseeing how impactful the effort really is when it comes to the supply chain?
Right. We do inspections. I mean, we're not specifically looking for child trafficking. However, with all of our suppliers, whether it's the local coffee suppliers, we check the plantations and we make sure that the coffee is, done in a way that's, healthy and it's clean. And we also check to see if there's any signs of child trafficking. Our laundry suppliers, we visit the laundry suppliers. Food suppliers who are importing food from overseas, of course, there's nothing we can do about that. We can't check it. But all of our local suppliers, we do visits to make sure that our supply chains are well run. And as a byproduct to our visits, we look around, and because now through the code and the training, we're aware that these things can happen. Whereas maybe previously, I wouldn't say we'd turn a blind eye, but we wouldn't look for it. But now, because we've all had the training, it's something we look out for. One of the things we do for safety in our hotels is there's 5 steps of safety where you kind of look around before you start a project and you see if there's anything that could be a danger. And previous to that training, sometimes we just jump into a project. Okay, so the training that we're doing on that is similar to the training that now we have with the code and child trafficking. It's brought it to the forefront of our minds.
Yeah, terrific. And I think it's really down to the awareness. If the awareness through training is raised, then you will get more attention to the topic and you will get more reports. You will pick up more signs that you wouldn't have picked up before. So that is great. Just also to mention.
Sorry, real quickly. Like I said with the training, a housekeeper going into a room might not be aware of the signs of child trafficking in the room because they weren't trained. They're a daily worker coming in and a trainee coming in to clean a room, and they wouldn't be aware. But however, sitting through the training, now all of a sudden, that paraphernalia or whatever condoms are, on the floor, all of a sudden, they're going to take it more seriously and they're not going to laugh about it. They're going to say, hey, wait a minute, is there something wrong here? Or is this just, a couple on their honeymoon, right? So again, without the code and without that training, we wouldn't have that awareness. So that's where we see the value in the code.
Brilliant. And so your connection held up well. We understood every word. Now I get a message that my connection is wobbly. I hope you can still hear me.
No, I hear you, Carl.
Perfect. Damien also texts me and says, I should mention that the code, obviously, when I talk about monitoring, and so it's not an accreditation body. The code asks, obviously, for feedback from companies and from LCRs and maybe for some reports of those experiences, but it's not really about accreditation in that sense. Well, Chucky, I think you mentioned and have maybe the most experience of being an active trainer to that subject. And so it is a sensitive subject. A sensitive subject matters. It's in any context difficult to speak about it. I think it's not that there's any part in the world where people say it's so easy to speak about these issues, but then there are certain cultural contexts where things can be spoken about more or less, where there's a culture of reporting or coming forward or less. How is your experience in engaging, and how do you create the comfort and the safety amongst those that you engage with to speak about those experiences and those topics?
The younger group is quite open now. They're different. They've got phones. We've been able to talk to them about cyberbullying, and they're becoming more aware of these words. Their parents, they don't want to talk about it. They don't want to acknowledge these things have taken place because actually many of them have been privy to problems in the villages themselves. But the younger generation are very active, and they're very excited to, when they're working in the hotels, to be aware and look around. They're feeling more confident that they can come out and help them. That
is wonderful. And then it really looks like there's a generational development going on, that in parallel, that we're all connected and more communicative all together. We're also more comfortable to communicate and speak about certain.
But even
things.
for us, the code gave us strength to motivate all of this. If I hadn't been introduced to the code, and I would not have understood things that actually went on inside hotels and inside these industries. And having gone into it, it's opened up a whole different world to the trainees as well. So the partnership is fantastic, and I really appreciate the help.
We love to hear that, Jackie, and I know Damien loves to hear that also. It is great, and especially in a country like Myanmar, where so much work is to be done, where it is so difficult, the context to work there. So we really appreciate your work. But Joyatri, I mean, you mentioned before that, especially in the informal sector, it is really, they sometimes fall through the cracks of the official system. There's no real regulation that applies to them. Sometimes there's not appropriate legislation maybe in place to really address all of those informal businesses. And so how do you engage with the government, and also in the context of India that is so decentralized? How do you engage with the government with maybe on better laws and on more awareness on and also where often this topic, maybe sometimes the awareness is there, but it's ignored, it's brushed under the carpet. And so to push for better legal response and maybe also for better law enforcement on these issues.
I think one of the things that we do is we take up a layered approach. What I mean by that is we work from a destination level to the national government. At the destination level, our work primarily focuses on the local government and the various entities which the tourism departments have set up. Something like maybe a district tourism authority, or there are spaces like there are entities like destination management corporations. So very important to look at what is the destination level governance mechanism. And if you can understand that governance mechanism, then slowly you would be able to build up what is the level of district and then state and what exists in the national level. So we try and work with first stake of our work is at the destination level to have evidences and to have data. With that data and the evidence, we try and work with local government systems and then the district administrations to include child protection mechanisms as part of their licensing process or as part of their own monitoring process, because they are also a regulating body. Often, as you said in the beginning, that there are home sharing. So if there's a homestay, but the homestay licenses are not given by the Ministry of Tourism. It is given by the local government authority. So the local district authority has the wherewithal to regulate any such licensing process. So we try and work with them to figure out that to give them some tools to monitor and to regulate licenses if there is no fulfillment. Like in some cases, we work in 21 destinations across the country. Out of 21 destinations, we have 5 destinations where the local government has actually issued a classification order, which basically means they have put down 5 criteria to say that their destination is sustainable. And one of that is the child protection. So they looked at child protection policy and its implementation as part of the sustainability guideline that they are now going to implement. That is one work that we are doing at the destination level. So though there is no governing law for the informal sector, but the virtue of their operating in a particular destination, the district administration can govern them and can regulate them. Second comes of our national and our state commissions. There we primarily work with Women and Child Department, and we work with the Children Commission, and we work with the tourism department. Here our approach is very simple, where we try and identify their own policies and try to put in tourism as a context and not look at it from a point saying you need to do this or do that. For example, the commissions, the Child Commission at a national level has this guidelines which talks about in a mega tourism events, what would be the child protection guidelines. And we have actually added this part there saying it is not only about the law enforcement agencies, but each of the shopkeepers who are coming there also have a role to play. So we try and work with what is the existing policies they have. We don't really go into always try and start a new lawmaking process. We try and see how can we strengthen what is already existing and how we can implement it better so that it can yield its results. Another part that we do, sorry, I just 1 second. Another part that we do is lots of orientation that we do, lots of training we do of the law enforcement officers at various levels. We work with the ministries to provide them training, data, evidence, so that they can themselves negotiate. Another very important work we do is to work with the work with the member of parliament, who can actually put our word in those power corridors. So we don't have access to it, but we have access through these MPs. So we work with the members of parliament quite a bit. And the third pillar of work that we do it with industry associations like FICCI, ASSOCHAM, this kind of formation that we have in India.
Yeah, so it is really it is apparent that this is all these problems are global problems that manifest themselves though on local levels, and in order to address it, we need to understand how they transcend borders, but also really understand the local context. And we just got a little executive summary of a masterclass of advocacy and campaigning in India, which is certainly a complex environment to work with. But it's true, you have to make others your agents also, and that's what I meant in the beginning, that everyone needs to play a role. We can't win this alone. And so, yeah, congratulations, Joyatri, for your work there. I mean, I have one last question. I don't see any questions in the chat. If there are any, please alert me to the fact if I missed any. But I just want to give the same question to Chucky and to Winston. Say like, okay, let's see if there's a concrete case where someone in your company or in your organization picks up an actual case of trafficking or sexual exploitation. What happens then? Have you had that experience, and what's the actual process or procedure that you follow?
Can I go first?
Yes, please go. Jackie.
Okay. So we have a relationship with the hotel group that we're working with. If there is something that is picked up and they haven't picked up anything yet, we do have a relationship with the hospital that is nearby who deal in human trafficking and child exploitation. So we don't ourselves get involved. We just pass it straight on to the professionals. So there is that in place.
And do you get feedback? I mean, like if you remember a concrete example of when you pass on victims through the system, what are their experiences?
We haven't had that. We've only had recipients coming from trafficked situations, and then go straight. We try and rehabilitate and help them in other areas and then send them back. And that's the only thing we've dealt with, which has been very positive. But in terms of the hotel group, maybe we're lucky, but we haven't had any issues.
Winston, I guess, I mean, like you are in so many markets, you would have to choose any that you have an experience or picked up a case. Do you have an example?
Yeah. Unfortunately, we've had a couple of cases over the last couple of years since we've made this more of an issue in our company, and so we share what's going on the hotel level shares with us at the corporate office when anything happens. So the few cases that we've had have been in major markets, Jakarta, Surabaya, where somebody will lease out or rent out a hotel room from us and use it for, prostitution, unfortunately. And because the staff is aware, they'll pick up on it. And our policy is to, as kindly as possible, go to the room with security if need be, and just explain to them that this is unacceptable and this is not behavior that's accepted in any of our properties. And we try to meet with the girl herself and see if there's any issues. And if there are, we do have good communication in all of our hotels with the head of either if it's in Bali, the head of the Banjar, the villages, or in the larger cities with the police departments. And if the girl does seem like this is really not, what's going on with her and she has an issue, then we make sure that she gets out of the situation that she's in. And yeah, yes, like I said, it's happened a couple of times, but luckily because of the training, we picked up on it, and hopefully we've saved a life or two.
Yeah, brilliant. That's the stories we need to hear, and one has to consider this a success story, as sad as the example is, but and that's really
100%. Yeah, 100%. But, I think that's where John got in touch with Damien. We had a couple of cases early on in the pandemic where these kind of things were normally going on outside the hotel. Like I said, all those things were closed down. So people thought, hey, I've got a great way. There's this new application, and we can, set up the girl in a room and, use this application, and guys can just come and go. And,
exactly.
Yeah.
If I can jump in there as well.
Sure, please.
For us, it's the training for these trainees, that they themselves are protected in the villages, because they are the ones that have been trafficked or exploited. So even before they go into the hotels and see those situations, this training is absolutely essential for them. So they're now aware of it and they know what to look for. So for us, that's the beginning.
Yeah.
Well,
we do what we can.
Yes, exactly. That's what the code is about. That what ECPAT is about. I think that's what all of us are about when it comes to that topic. Well, thank you so much, Jackie. Thank you, Winston. Thank you, Joetri. It was great, and thank you so much for sharing your examples, your work, for making the right choices in your businesses, in your organizations, for pushing forward on the topic, and for continuing to inspire others to join this effort. We really need everyone, and congratulations for your important work. Thank you so much. Manisha, I give this back to you.
Thank you very much, Thomas. And thank you, Winston, Jackie, and Joytree, for sharing the experiences that you have. I think, as you said, Thomas, it is really about working together and raising the awareness and helping people feel comfortable that they can speak up when they suspect that there is a case. So really inspiring to hear the work that you're doing and having such a great impact. And hopefully that will also encourage others to do similar trainings and really get that conversation going, because as you said, Thomas, it's not an easy conversation to have in many places, but it's an important one. And Jackie, as you pointed out, that if we make people aware before they go into the, hotels or other industries in tourism, that they know that they also could be potentially victims, and really making them aware and having that conversation. And I think it's great that the younger generation is willing to speak about it. And I think with social media and the internet, it's making people much more comfortable talking about some very uncomfortable topics. So huge thanks to our panel. I know that we didn't have any questions posted in the chat, but I just wanted to check if anybody wanted to take the floor to either react to anything that you've heard, or if anybody had any questions. You can use the reaction box to raise your hand at the bottom if anybody has any questions. If not immediately, I'm hoping you will have some more questions and comments in the next section of our work. And Thomas, thank you very much for excellent facilitation of that panel. Really great that you asked some tough questions and got some great answers. We're going to move into the feedback and discussion on the code. So I am going to encourage you to use those chat functions and also raise your hands. And in this second section, we want to really hear from you. You know, we've heard from the panel already, but we want to hear from those of you in the audience. You know, what is working well with the code? You know, what do you find is good about it? How are you using it in a positive way? But we also want to know what needs improving, because obviously nothing is perfect. So we want to be able to understand where are there areas that we might need improvements, and what suggestions would you have for making those improvements? Also, the point that Thomas had made is, you know, how do we engage more, particularly in the informal sector, companies in travel and tourism? So would love to hear any ideas that you may all have about how to engage more companies in the code. And then the last big question we wanted to discuss is, you know, how can the Secretariat help improve its support to local partner companies and local code representatives? What would you like to have the Secretariat do more of, or do better of, or do differently? So would love to hear all your thoughts and comments on that. And again, I do encourage you to put your thoughts in the chat if you'd like, or to raise your hand and we can have you speak. So you can take the floor as well. However, before I ask that, before I turn it over to all of you, we do have a tribute message that we would like to share from Fabio Gonzalez Flores, who's the regional coordinator for ECPAT International in Latin America. And the tribute is to our friend and colleague, Josefina Colina. Fabio, over to you, please.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I'm Fabio Gonzalez. I'm part of the ECPAT International Secretariat team, and I want to celebrate the life and legacy of our friend and colleague, Josefina Paulino. As most heroes, she left us before her time, and all of us who learned from her work or laughed at her beautiful Caribbean humor miss her already. I met Josefina about 10 years ago, and she was between concerned and amused that a cold city boy like myself was sweating for the heat in the most inappropriate outfit for Panama City, and the nervousness of speaking in public. It was the day she asked me not to call her Maria Josefina, because in her words, it sounded too formal coming from a guy with a tie. Those who met her will agree with me that she was able to calm down any distress with a joke, with the same ability and passion of when she took a stoic stance to defend children. She knew very well when to smile, but also what to keep us away from smiling. Us, serving in the global fight to protect children, have a lot to learn from her. She managed to involve people that did not even care about their own children before, to change their ways and to learn their role in creating protected environments. She was energetic to point out when children were being harmed out of pure indifference, and kind enough to congratulate those doing something about it. This event is an opportunity to celebrate her efforts in bringing together private sector, government, and civil society organizations. She had the necessary human touch to build bridges between us. Our best way to celebrate her memory now is to make a very good use of these bridges and to enhance our collaboration to protect children beyond our personal interests. May her beautiful soul rest in peace. Thank you.
Thank you, Fabio. And sounds like Josefina was an amazing woman, and I'm so terribly sorry for your loss. Again, I do encourage all of you to put in the chat sort of what are some of the things that are working well, what needs improvements, how can we engage companies, more companies in travel and tourism, and any thoughts that you may have on how the Secretariat can improve its support to local partner companies and local code representatives. And feel free to raise your hand and take the floor. To kick us off, I'm going to turn the floor over to Gabriella Kuhn, who's the head of program Child Protection in Travel and Tourism with ECPAT International. Gabriella, please.
Thank you very much for this introduction. And it's not easy to speak now after this reminder of Fabio, because we all mourned the passing away of our colleague and a great champion who inspired and so many people, and also improved lives of many children. And not only her, because we heard from so many other people speaking already here in this events that are so committed to this cause. So now after this, I'm going to speak a little bit on a broader picture that, well, maybe it has a little bit less of human touch, but it's also important to understand this broader picture in which the code is operating, because it's not detached from a broader human rights and sustainability agenda, and it's one of other tools. And as it was said before, we can only work together on that. So that's why we wanted also to introduce this broader picture to have a better understanding of this. And as it was already told by many people, the 6 criteria of the code are very useful. There are a number of tools. We have the risk analysis assessment tool that it's like important part of all the due diligence processes for the companies. The e-learnings that help to increase the awareness or the volunteerism policy, raising awareness of specific aspects and new risks emerging in the travel and tourism industry. So all of this helps business to meet human rights and sustainability requirements in relation to children's rights, to live free from all forms of violence. And the code is also a practical tool that is inscribed in a broader advocacy efforts of ECPAT International with all our network. And we heard examples from India here, and there are other local code representatives. So with all the civil society organizations that we are working with in over 100 countries to end the sexual exploitation of children. So let me speak here about some of these corporate responsibilities and legal compliance requirements that the companies can meet by implementing very practical measures that are offered by the code. Well, one of these was already mentioned by Lucio and UNICEF, of course, General Comment 16 on state obligations regarding the impact of business sector on children's rights. I will also like to talk about UN guiding principles on business and human rights, that it's a globally recognized framework for state duties and business responsibilities in preventing and addressing business-related human rights abuse. So many businesses and governments, they refer to UNGPs, but children's rights are often not equally prioritized. So with the code members and all the examples that we also heard today, the companies actually are role models and so-called front runners because they give children's rights an equal priority as part of the broader human rights framework. So I also like to bring your attention to national legislations that have been evolving in the last years. So UNGP is a voluntary framework. But it paved the way for binding national legislations. So, for example, we have Netherlands that took a lead specifically on child labor, and it's working on comprehensive mandatory due diligence regulation. We have German Parliament that passed mandatory supply chain due diligence act that, among other rights, explicitly refers to the risk of the worst forms of child labor and sexual exploitation including. And recently, EU Commission published also a proposal for a directive which aims to foster a sustainable and responsible corporate behavior throughout the global supply chains that will apply both to EU companies, but also the ones out of the EU. And also at global level, we have some countries, although mostly in Latin America and Latin and South America, that have national codes that are standards on child protection. And these are the requirements for travel and tourism companies to actually operate in the country. So all these developments, and many of them in the recent years, they mean that more and more companies will be actually obliged to address children's rights risk through their operations and supply chains. But of course, I mean, there are a number of limitations to the due diligence instruments, which poses questions, you know, how really they will help to better protect children on the ground. However, these laws will also help NGOs such as ECPAT and many others, and also the ones many that we are working with, and many others that work on this topic, to look into business infringements on children's rights. Referring to the code, I mean, also, of course, code has its limitations, and it's a voluntary instrument. But the companies can make a real change on the ground by preventing and reporting cases of sexual exploitation. And at the same time, through implementing the code, they can meet national legal standards that are in many countries already. And third, I'd like to mention the UNWTO Framework Convention on Tourism Ethics, that it's an important reference for combating sexual exploitation of children, as offenders misuse travel and tourism infrastructure and services to commit the crimes. And this is to stress that it's not the fault of the industry. Their infrastructure is being misused, and we had great examples of the companies that are taking efforts to stop this. So that convention, ethics convention of UNWTO, it complements other international human rights standards, and if ratified by more countries, because right now it's been ratified only by one country, as a binding instrument, it can help contribute to the realization of sustainable development goals, specifically in relation to sustainable tourism, with people and child rights in focus. So again, the companies that are members of the codes, they already take action, and they are demonstrating already that sustainability is a holistic concept that encompasses also people and children rights, along other topics they may be working on as part of their sustainability agendas, as environment or economic issues. And we are not alone with the code members in this fight against sexual exploitation, and recognizing that sustainability is very much about people and children. We already heard today from Randy from GSTC, but just to remind everybody that their criteria, they have specific criteria and child protection performance indicator that calls upon all destinations to have laws, practices, and establish codes of conduct to prevent and report on trafficking and sexual exploitation of children, in particular through implementation of the 6 criteria of the code. And also, I'd like to mention here a big player, World Travel and Tourism Council, that represents the industry globally. And they also define sustainability in a holistic way, with people in focus, along with the environmental agenda. So just like last week at the Global Summit of WTTC, they provide a platform to discuss how access to the communities can be positive for economic development, but also that it comes with the risk to children, and that these need to be identified and mitigated, and how for destinations and companies to be sustainable, that they need to make a positive contribution to the communities by protecting children. So just to sum up, the code is this practical approach in a broader framework that I presented here, of a mix of binding and voluntary measures to help companies meet corporate responsibilities and legal compliance requirements. But of course, most importantly, and what was discussed here with great examples, it's through this implementation of the criteria and use of the code tools, companies are supported to act, to be proactive, to act before the harm is done, and to stop the sexual exploitation of children. So I'd like to thank with this all the code members to being these leaders, and really appreciate your work, with always requires a lot of human touch to it, beyond the legal broader frameworks that I refer to, but are also part of this picture. So thank you very much, and I look forward to our discussion.
Thanks very much, Gabriela. And I think it's really helpful to have that framing and just a reminder of what are the kind of legal obligations out there and the guidance that's out there, because yet it's really important to fall back on those, I think, as the work continues. We've got a question, which I'm really excited about because it's a great question from Dr. Raj Karim from NCSEC Malaysia. And the question is, were there any changes in scenarios of child exploitation in travel and tourism during COVID? And what should we look out for? Gabriela, do you want to try to tackle that question?
Yeah, I can start, and everybody else, and Damien also welcome to add. I mean, of course, there's very much of exploitation went online with limitations to travel, but it doesn't mean that children were not exploited. And online and offline exploitation of children, it's not two different words. You know, it's the same child that is exploited online, and offenders will look to exploit these children once the restrictions to travel ease and travel to the destinations, and to the destinations that have lenient laws and that have social tolerance to this crime. So that's why it's so important that in the view of the recovery of the industry, and it's expected to recover very fast, also according to the latest estimates by World Travel and Tourism Council. And we need to make sure that as it recovers and as the local communities and children are more and more vulnerable because of all the impact of the pandemic of the last 2 years on various destinations and with the poverty. So when these communities and children are more vulnerable to sexual exploitation, we need to step up the action and make sure that the destinations are sustainable in terms of prioritizing child protection and taking concrete steps.
Super, Gabriela. Thanks very much. And I think that point that the tourism industry is set to get right back on track, it will require us to be really vigilant about making sure that we're able to spot the signs and follow up. Damien, maybe you can come in here as well, because the other part of that question is, are there particular things that we should be looking for as a result of COVID or the changes that have come about with COVID? And I think, Gabriela, your point about children being particularly vulnerable after all the lockdowns and the impact that, not going to school has had. So that I think, or doing online schooling instead, that's probably also going to have a bit of an impact, I imagine. But Damien, maybe I can turn to you for your thoughts on that.
Yeah, thanks, Manisha. Thanks, Gabriela. We've had a few anecdotal responses about this topic, some of which have been about people who are working the hospitality or tourism industry who have been stood down or put on furlough, who have essentially lost their jobs. And that's resulted in them taking their children out of school to sell things on the street or to find other ways of work. And that's a slippery slope in a lot of ways to exploitation, but also, a wider issue of child neglect. The other thing I would maybe point to is the international tourism is restarting, but quite slowly, but domestic tourism is restarting in a lot of countries quite quickly. And so we're seeing a lot of domestic offenders or regional offenders. And that was highlighted in the 2016 global study on exploitation of children in travel and tourism. And I think that issue has only got bigger. So the stereotype of a older white male from Europe or North America or Australia is less pertinent. I mean, yes, that happens, but it's much more local and regional in terms of how we deal with that and how companies need to look out for that. Thanks.
Thanks very much, Damien. I don't see any hands, but I do hope that others have some ideas and thoughts of, what's working well with the code and what would you like to see improved and what more support would you like to see from the Secretariat? I mean, it's great that you've all signed up to the code, that you're implementing it, but what else needs to be done? So I'm going to encourage further questions in the chat, or please do raise your hand. I do have an input from Josephine Hamann from the local code, who is the local code representative with ECPAT in Germany, who's going to give us her input via a recording that we've got from her now. So I'm going to turn over to Josephine, please.
Hi there, I'm greeting you from Germany. I'm sorry that I cannot be with you at the moment, but I'm happy to give you a short online input, and thanks for the opportunity for doing this. My name is Josephine Hamann. I work for ECPAT Germany as the local code representative. So I work closely together with the German travel and tourism companies that sign the code or that would like to sign the code. First of all, I would like to thank all of you who already signed and who are engaged in child protection, travel and tourism so very much, and also those who joined quite recently, because we did actually have during the COVID pandemic some new code members in Germany that decided to implement child protection measures within their company, and I'm quite happy that this was possible even in times of the corona pandemic and difficulties that many travel and tourism companies faced. Yeah, as you all know, the travel and tourism industry was struck hard by the COVID-19 pandemic, I'm sorry. But however, we did try to do as much as possible, also together as a network, like all the member companies in Germany, code member companies in Germany as a network, but also from our side, from ECPAT, what was possible. We tried to engage in social media activities or in awareness raising campaigns, and I'm quite happy that some of that was possible. We did see even an increase in the demand for online trainings and workshops. I think at the first it was a little bit hesitant to implement such trainings, but now that we all are used to it, the demand is still there, and I think it's a great opportunity to train employees or to train your staff, your tour guides, for example, also. And we are implementing quite a lot of trainings these days to do that, and I think this will still stick with us even now in times that present events and trainings are possible as well. Then we will host an event in June together with several member companies of the code that are already members, because we would like to kind of inform also new companies that are interested in signing to get together, to sit on one table, to discuss what's relevant at the moment, where we're heading, what are existing strategies, what needs to change, maybe because of the COVID-19 pandemic, and like because of strategies that changed anyway within the company. So we want to host this event in Berlin in June to kind of set the stone again for where we at, what do we need, where can we help each other. And I think this is quite important, because this network is needed. No one can do anything by his or herself, so it's quite helpful if we stick together and if we combine what we already have, combine knowledge, share that, and share experience. So I'm quite happy, and I'm looking forward to that, and to use this as a starting point. And yeah, then I'd like to thank all of you who supported us and still support us, and engaged with us in child protection activities, in awareness raising, for example, using online banners that we provided in the last fall and winter 2021. Those were spread to raise awareness for our reporting platform, our national one. And yeah, I'm looking forward to quite many activities in the future. Thank you all, and have a good day.
Thanks very much, Josephine, and great to see all that work that you were able to carry out during COVID. And I think, as you said, the online training possibility is something that I think has opened up a whole new world for everyone in terms of being able to reach lots of people and continue that learning that goes on. We've got another question from Winston. Thank you very much. Would it be possible to develop a more senior certification from the code for a unit or hotel leader that would be the key person in case of any issues? Rank and file would be certified, and there would be a few senior managers with a higher certification and additional training from the code. Great question, Winston. Damien or Gabriella, one of you want to?
Yeah, I'm happy to field that one. Yeah, thank you, Winston, for the question. The e-learning that we have and that we provide to our member companies, it's not certification. I mean, participants receive a certificate if they successfully complete a quiz at the end of their learning sessions, but it's, like I said before, it's not an auditing process. So we're quite different from other agencies that do more in-depth auditing. The other thing I would say in terms of having different levels of certification is the challenge of different jurisdictions and different countries, where the local reporting mechanisms will probably be very different between different places. The different NGOs that you might want to connect with, the other local partners are going to be quite different. So I don't think it's a bad idea. We can certainly take that as you know, a suggestion to look at. But in the short term, essentially we provide the online training to member companies, and then if they would like, they can connect with local code representatives to do in-person training or more specialized training for that company, that region, that city, that country. Thanks.
Thanks very much, Damien. Gabriella, did you want to come in as well? Did you have any thoughts on that?
No, I maybe can just add that we developed last year new e-learnings for the code, and there is also a general module that is more adjusted also for the managers. It's not role specific, so this can be also useful. And as Damien said, definitely reaching out to local code representatives in a given country that can also provide in-person trainings that hopefully will be possible to organize this year.
Super. Thanks very much, Gabriella. And Winston, I'm going to turn back to you because I know you've got a short presentation to give us an example of how you've been training your staff members on how to identify and address human trafficking, which will be, I think, a great sort of practical case for others to consider if they haven't embarked on similar training. So Winston, can I hand over to you, and hopefully your internet is going to hold out for us?
I hope so. I hope so. It seems to be a little bit better. I think I kicked my son off his computer, so I should have a little bit more bandwidth. You know, these kids today. Anyway, yeah, these are just, you know, some slides that we share with all of our staff. It's a mandatory training that every hotel must go through. And yeah, my question, and Damien, thank you for your answer. It was great. Let's try to work together, and I can arrange to have regional meetings set up so that we get, let's say, the general managers or a more senior manager to attend a group session, and we just share some ideas and some additional training so that, you know, the hotels are even better prepared. So where we've gone from really having no training whatsoever in this subject to now our staff are really aware. And, you know, the question earlier on how has COVID affected this, and Damien's response to, yeah, the older white expat guy, stereotype. We found that during COVID, it was all the local market, that was creating these issues because there were no tourists from overseas in Indonesia. So it really brought to our attention how big this problem can be and how we must be aware. It's not just in Bali or in some of the other tourist destinations. So again, it's really hit home with us. And John, like I said, my president and CEO was the first one to pick up on this, and now we're doing it. So this is the first slide. I think there were 3 slides maybe that they were going to have. So we just let the staff know that who are these people, and they come from all backgrounds. It's young, older people who again are promised maybe a life that's better for them, and they're stuck in something so that they didn't realize they were going to end up in. So again, it says there in the bottom, we're the eyes and ears of the hotel. The staff have to understand that they can make a difference. Next slide. And then this section here on why do they do it, you know? And with the growth of technology, the traffickers are moving their business off the streets and into the internet. So it's online. You can hook up with people. And again, maybe who they think they're hooking up with is someone of age. And because everything can be hidden on the internet, and then they get to the hotel and they find out that maybe it's not that way. Are they going to leave? No, they're going to, again, take advantage of potentially someone who's underage. So again, it's just creating these slides and doing the training and making everybody. Next slide. And again, so, you know the signs of sex trafficking. You know, when they clean a room, what are they looking for? What stands out as being something that is not normal? So they can report it. It's just all about, again, as everybody on the panel has said, it's all about awareness, and that's key. And we have a video that we got online that we share as well. So yeah, I just wanted to share these few slides with you guys and let everybody know that it's not difficult to get everybody trained up. It doesn't take that long, and it makes a world of difference.
Thanks very much, Winston. And I think that's great that you've got that as a mandatory training for your staff, and that it's throughout the company, and that kind of impetus for it really came from the top, and that it's really being pushed by senior management. I think oftentimes that leadership really pushing a particular issue can really make sure that it resonates throughout a company or an organization. So it's great that that's being done, and hopefully is inspiring others to do similar trainings, because as you said, it doesn't take a huge amount of time, but it can have a huge impact. I know that we don't have any other questions from the audience, and I don't see any hands, but I do just want to give people a last chance if anyone has any other thoughts or comments. Oh, I see that Celine has a question. Oh, there it is. Sorry, I missed that. Apologies, Celine. Celine de Verheyen, who's from Defense for Children, ECPAT, Netherlands. Celine's question is, some hotel chains want to monitor which individual hotels are training their staff. Would monitoring and possibly also certification per hotel be possible in the future? So a bit linked to that certification question from before. Damien, do you want to take that? And since that's the last one, maybe I can also ask you to do. No, I've got a summary to do. So I'll let you have that question first. Sorry.
Thanks, Celine. And one of the things that we did when we redeveloped our e-learning was to actually include some additional fields, so that rather than just putting in the password for the e-learning, users can also input their property name and country. So that we can better identify where they're coming from, especially for the global companies. That's been a frustration. You know, we don't know if Accor is training their staff in Nigeria or India or whatever, but that's been fixed. Well, that's been improved since last year. So that sort of data is now getting better for us. Certification per hotel. It's an ongoing conversation that we have with companies. We would much prefer each hotel to be an individual member, at least every country operation of a multinational to be a member. Some chains or some organizations are open to that. Others want to keep it in-house. I won't name names, but it's difficult sometimes to convince them to join at a country or a property level. But at least with the e-learning, we have some better identification these days about which properties and which people.
Super. Thanks so much, Winston. And it's always quite difficult, I imagine, to get consensus across a broad membership about which direction to go. But great that you're able to track a little bit more who's been doing those e-learnings. Since we don't have any other questions, and I know we are coming up on time, I want to just thank everyone who has provided such great examples of the work that they're doing through the panel, through the opening remarks that we had as well. it's really struck me that, it is an issue where everybody has to work together. And what's that point about, staff are the eyes and ears of the hotel, any organization, it's everybody's responsibility to really look for the signs of trafficking or sexual exploitation and to really be aware and have the avenues to be able to report that in a safe manner in order to be able to protect children better. So huge thanks to all of you for the work that you are doing within your organizations and companies. And I think really the fact that you're able to work across different stakeholders and really put the code into practice and train your colleagues and your staff, but also working with your supply chains and suppliers to make sure that awareness is being passed along and really building that broader community so that we are able to really try to stop sexual exploitation and trafficking everywhere that we can is really important. And I think the work that the code is doing is, a work in progress, obviously, because there's so many cases out there that we still have to tackle. And I think that point also that Thomas, you raised about how do we start working much more with the informal sector as well. I see that Ann-Christine Vervik from ECPAT Norway has just dropped a comment in. In Norway, Ukrainian refugees are being accommodated in hotels throughout the country. A 17-year-old Ukrainian girl was recently groomed on social media and picked up by a trafficker. Are any of the members addressing this particular situation? I don't know if anybody else has had that situation, and I imagine that there probably are other cases, just given the number of refugees that are leaving Ukraine and looking for safety and accommodation. So if anyone has any examples, please do drop that into the chat. Otherwise, Damien, I don't know if you, maybe when you're doing your summary, you can also just pick up on that. But really, yes, just I think it's great that there's all this awareness out there and sharing those kind of examples of how the training is being done, whether it's for young people before they go into the industry, or even once you've got staff in the industry, how to make sure that they are aware of what the signs are and what are the avenues to report so that you're able to prevent and respond in cases where there is sexual exploitation or trafficking is critical. Maybe, Damien, I can hand over to you for a bit of a summary before we wrap up. And also if you can come in around if any members are addressing similar situations in the
Thank you, Manisha. I don't have any specific examples such as the Ukraine one that was brought up, but the online to offline transition is becoming or has become increasingly worrying in the last couple of years. And there is a real fear that as tourism and travel recommences, whether it's for tourism or because of refugees, that there's a real vulnerability for children to be groomed and then to be exploited online. I don't know specifically if there are any specific members addressing that situation. It's kind of more ECPAT's issues rather than the code specifically, but we'd be happy to continue the conversation. I wanted to thank everyone for joining today. I know it's been a long couple of hours, but I appreciate the time and the inputs and the feedback. It's really inspiring to see what we can all do together to do child protection better, and to encourage working together with civil society and NGOs and governments and private sector to work to address this problem. My dream is that we will all be out of a job at some point because this problem will have been addressed. It's a long time away. So in the meantime, I'd like to thank you all so much for your inputs and your participation. Thanks.
Thanks very much, Damien. And it's my pleasure to thank you all for being here. Really appreciate all the introductory remarks that we had, the great panel that you facilitated, Thomas, with Jackie, Winston, and Joya-Tree. So thank you to all three of you for sharing your experiences and the great work that you're doing. And then also Winston for the the training that you're doing, which I understand was also part of a longer slide deck that perhaps could be shared if people are interested. We do have an evaluation survey for today's meeting that we would appreciate if you would fill in. The link has been dropped into the chat by Vaughn, and we would appreciate your time if you can give us some feedback so that improvements can be made for future events like this. Thank you so much to all of you for your time and your engagement, and look forward to hopefully having more of these conversations in future. The beauty of the internet is that we can come together this way, even though there are some, obviously, the darker sides of the internet that are not so great. Thank you to all of you for your continued work. I'd also like to thank our interpreters and our captioners who has been providing the transcript, as well as everyone in PHAP with all the background work, Marcus, Vaughn, and Denny. And huge thanks to everyone in the Code and ECPAT who have supported the preparations for today. Thank you for a really interesting conversation, and I wish all of you a very good rest of the day and rest of the week. Thank you very much.